Okay, pretty standard intro.
I like the flow.
Yeah, flow is good. Ooh.
Okay, I feel like we needed to hit that a little bit
Just a little
harder
harder, just a little harder.
because this is an intense song.
Bam, 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 boom, boom, boom. Ooh, I like the try. I need to see more commit to the hits.
Yeah,
It looks like you're
yeah.
not really selling it. You're very delicate with it. Your whips could, the placement of the whip could be like way more under. I got a couple feedback on that particular. I like that pull. Right here, you're air tracing. You're not really committed to the line. I mean, you're committed to the line here and there, but you're floating a lot. There isn't a use of macro grid here.
Yeah.
We got a mode change.
Clean mode change. I like it.
It's a lot of filler.
Yeah, I feel like we're resetting into the filler.
Okay, we mode changed for no reason.
It was a little too late. If it wanted to happen, it should have happened right
Yeah.
before that drop hit.
Well, there's not really a change in like anything. It's just a change
No.
in color.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need more disciplined lines, more tracing.
I feel like there's a little bit of floating between like the tech positions.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Mode. Show the video, the duo presets. Gotcha.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense for sure.
Okay. I was about to say we're just changing modes for no reason.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've never seen Will change modes this many times.
That's totally cool. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So
Get through the modes. It was a video. Okay,
yeah, I'm gonna treat it as as if you didn't change the modes. Then is that
Yeah.
fair? Yeah. To treat it like there were no mode changes.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. So right off the bat, what I get from the beginning is that there's no plan. We're just flowing.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Because we have this intro here. It's not really refined. You're kind of just doing the filler moves, but there's no plan in terms of grid, or there's no plan in terms of pathing. Right? So you can use like pathing as like a motif. And I talk about this all the time. It was did order to duo presets. I should got you. Yeah, so like at the beginning, and there's like a lot of floating, right? So you're very like legato type of movement, Glover, where like so legato is long, staccato is sharp, right? So like you're very like floaty, flow-esque, right? But sometimes being in that like that consistent state of like floating sometimes can bite you in the butt when it comes down to grid work, because like you might be like going through like the connections here and there, but you're not really like completing it, right? So like tracing the hard lines so you get that like that satisfying like shape and completion, but you're also like you're presenting the illusion of the grid, right? Because in here you're doing like a lot of like especially here, like there's not like really any static lines or isolation, right? And isolations are it puts your light show at like a higher level. Like if you want a higher level of a light show, like you need that level of isolation somewhere, but there really isn't any one point that's in focus. There's a lot of points. There's a lot of moving around, right?
And I think when I was talking about floating, right, and Will, you have like this kind of pace where we're like on this bounce timer, as I'm gonna call it. It's like a bounce timer, right? And every move we're bouncing, and then we're kind of like changing the shape and the move that we're doing, and then we're bouncing, and then we're coming into a different shape, and then we're bouncing, and we're going into like a small trace, and then we're bouncing into like these kinds of flow shapes and a little bit of this filler. And I think, like Kevin was saying, right, committing to these traces and committing to the shapes that you're in on a static plane, right? Like if we're right here and like I'm committing to all of these traces and like I'm imagining there's like, this wall in front of me, so I'm not going forward, I'm not coming back, like my hands are kind of locked in this position and I'm connecting these forms and I'm staying in these forms as well as currently I'm not letting my hands kind of come apart. I think that could it could unlock a lot of areas for you as far as where you feel like you're getting too repetitive.
Yeah, no, so like one remedy, right, is to maybe you don't have to do like long you don't have to like force yourself to do like do longer connections because it takes a lot of bandwidth. Right? I would say to like inch your way into like the longer traces or like the longer connections, right? So if you have to do like three traces, so it's like, maybe or like three movements, right? It's like one, two, three, move. You could even explode into another form, right? But like commit to this form, one, two, three, move. And then you like transition. You keep that point of contact. You keep it. You try to find an isolation point. Right now, in my mind, it's this point between my pinky, right? So like I stay there, and then I'm imagining the point right there, right? And I'm like staying there. I'm not floating, right? I'm not lingering. I find a point in space, right? So trace, keep that isolation there, then move or move.
Yeah,
Trace,
isolations
trace,
for
trace,
sure.
isolation, move. Trace, trace, move. Trace, trace, move. Jigga baby, I need to come see you, and you gotta drill some lessons to me.
Been working a lot on that as well. I've made some improvements since then. I definitely see what y'all are talking about. It's been something I noticed as well. Yeah, man. I mean, it's always great to be self-aware, and I know you said that this is kind of an older video because the last one you have recorded, which is fine, and just take what we're saying with a grain of salt. Obviously, a couple months in terms of gloving is a lot of time for someone to
Mhm.
develop their style and to find different things to do. But I think also what I would like to see from you is like I want to see you do combos. So the difference between a move and a combo is kind of what Kevin was talking about at the beginning where he felt like you were coming in with no plan. So if you have a move, right? Okay, and this is one that me and Toby, well, Toby, of course. Toby came up with a long time ago and it was one, two, three, four, five, six, right? I want you to have these combos where it's like point for point and it's a combo that you can repeat every time versus getting into a position and then just going where it feels right. And having those kinds of like hard stuck combos will help you get into that point of connection that Kevin was talking about both with isolations and everything else. And then you're a more like you have that old school style because like you
Yeah, he
said you have been
does.
gloving for 10 years,
Yeah, he's got
which
that.
means that you came up in a different era than what people are doing now. But I think also in that era a lot more people were doing these kinds of combos and they're not so much done anymore so much as like just having a lot of tech forms kind of like Scott had going on. um, but I think having these set pieces that you can pull out of your bag to kind of throw in and then transition out of them from there with whatever feels natural would give you a good basis for trying to figure out how to break away from that like repetitive resetting kind of like using your flow as a crutch because you have great flow. You have
Yeah. Yeah,
you
that's
undeniably you have great flow, and I think breaking yourself of that flow and trying to approach gloving in a more like meticulous and like binary, Kevin talks about there's binary glovers, and then there's kind of like free form
like
glovers. And I
abstract
think,
image. People who think in like an abstract
yes,
image. Yeah.
and I think forcing yourself into that binary style of gloving would take you up, like, you'd be jumping up
Yeah.
the ladder like four rungs at a
Right,
time.
right. So like I when I started gloving, or like for like the first 10 years of gloving, like I would see gloving as like an abstract image, right? Like sometimes I would think like super trippy, like this was like a spaceship. I'm going through space time and there's like
A
leaves that go
dragon.
dragon. I think of images. That's just naturally how I am. But like there are people, right, who see it as like a binary puzzle, like where they see
Ash.
just the logic, and they see just like the lines and just pure shapes. That when
Pilgrim.
Pilgrim is one of them. Like when I made that, uh when I started thinking in the realms of like binary, that's where I made, like, I found this. It's in everybody, bro, trust me. Like it's in everybody. People they're born and they tend to lean one way, but I wholeheartedly believe that everyone's got both. Just
Yeah,
people tend to go one
it's
direction.
tapping into it.
You got to
One's
tap into
natural.
it. Yeah, one is natural, and some I know. Yeah, some people are more naturally binary puzzle, right? But some people are naturally both at the same time.
Yeah.
But I'm unsure of what Will actually thinks, what he feels like maybe he is. But like for like binary puzzle, right? Like it's just thinking, okay, like if I have like my shape, it's asking yourself again like logical questions. So like if I have myself like this shape, like okay, what if I did it in like a box? What if I follow the pathing in like a box? Like if you want to get into like harder tech, the first thing that I did was I thought about doing my combos in a box, right? So like so you can take what you got, right? Kind of like your flow. You don't gotta get rid of it, right? I would say just use what you already have, and then like try to like imagine. And this is what I meant by it seemed like you didn't have a plan. Is thinking in terms of like space, right? Like you're starting the show, right? Okay, like okay, now I'm gonna think about like the box now. I'm gonna do my same moves, but maybe if I
Mm-hmm.
got
What's inside the box?
but like I'm gonna do it in a box. You're outlining like the box, right? And then like later on down the line, maybe you can start thinking, okay, I'm gonna do it in like a diamond. I'm gonna do the same thing that I did in a diamond. It's that pathing is only a stepping stone, right? That's the mindset that you need to get into a place where you become more gritty, because now you're thinking in terms of shapes and you're not free flow, right? Because when you build that understanding of moving in a box, it's just gonna come naturally, bro. Like you're gonna want to naturally move straighter, right? Not really as floaty. I think you guys mentioned I just definitely want to go with the flow, just kind of go where it feels right. Yeah, go where it feels right. Like Jacob pointed out, definitely could benefit more plan. Bro, when you start implementing like boxes and like these static lines, like what might feel right now might change later on. Like when you
Yeah.
feel like that connection, like, and that movement, like then you might know, like, I don't know, feels right. It's kind of a, it kind of depends on where you are and like what you're, how do I say this, like it kind of depends on how you grew up gloving, right? Like if you
Yeah.
grew up like you feel right, like, and then liquid feels right, right? But then like I want you to like really like be critical, like think about it, right? Like if you're trying to create like lines, is like that right, or like is this trace right? Is this trace logical, or like is it, or is doing this trace like kind of like that logical, right? Like it really depends. But then like yeah, feels right is very subjective. But the moment that
It
you get
is.
like disciplined, like the moment you feel that grid, like those grid lines, it changed my definition of what felt right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we've talked, me and Kevin have talked a lot with Infinite Andres, and I think we went over some stuff with him, and he immediately was receptive to it in a way that was like, you guys just ruined my gloving. And that's not like not a bad thing. It was just like, he's like, holy shit, like everything that I've done normally for so long now, I can feel that it feels wrong. And like I have all these things that I want to work on and fix and like try to change about my style now.
Yeah, and that's what happens, right? When you kind of yeah, but it's kind of the same like phenomenon that I had with musicality. Like when I first
Mm.
started gloving, like I thought I had like perfect musicality, bro. Like I thought I had perfect music. I felt so deeply like yeah, I'm hitting every single thing. But then like when you get older, right? When you get wiser, when you've been in the game for so long, you look back at your old stuff and you're like, man, what the hell was I thinking, bro? What sometimes what feels right isn't actually right sometimes. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And that just takes like experience and just kind of like learning other pieces, obviously. But like, yeah, like just put yourself more into like that box mindset sometimes when you're doing your connections. And I think that's definitely the stepping stone. Because like right here, you're in here at like 46 seconds, right? You've got your connection, right? You're there trace, but you're like out of it already, right? And then now
Mhm.
you're into more of the filler, right? You're more into the whips and the filler here. Um, what happens after this? Right here, okay, here we go. We're in the tech, and then we're here, and we got that bounce. I know what you mean by that bounce, but you're never really doing any hard contacts, right? So the string is pretty long, actually, right? Like think about it, like from here is like a minute. Okay, this is a pretty long string, pretty long but then like, okay, how long are we actually in? Okay, 17 seconds. 17 seconds of like a technically like a combination, right? But how often are you like creating boxes and like traveling the grid on every form, right? It's like you're separating each time and you're not really following
Mhm.
the lines. You're not really following the lines on like even like a z axis. A lot of it is x axis, right? But like you're like gliding, you're like moving around, right? And so try traveling like truthfully, okay? And what I mean by that is like if I'm gonna like do a trace down, then it's a trace down, and I'm not moving. I'm not doing like any secondary move. I'm not. It's a
Mhm.
trace down, and that's it.
That's static.
It's static. Trace down, trace down, trace down, trace down. Right. These are true pathings right here. Right. Same thing when you go all the way right. You're staying true to the unit. You're staying
Yep.
true to the path, and you can keep going, right? You could keep going, and guess what? The everything changes because look at my arm. My arm is from down my elbow. Okay, it's pointing down. Then when I go up, my elbow is now straight horizontal. It's not this. It's that, right? So if you could learn how to like just travel and imagine when you like change, you trace down, you trace left, hinge, trace up, trace up, trace up, trace right, trace. There's so many steps that you can take to make it more like to add more of that grid. And you could still add your flow to it, no problem. Like you could like
Oh
you do
yeah.
trace, and then glide change, right? Trace,
Yes.
then glide change. It's just options, right? It's just different options. So
So, so another big thing that I noticed as I just did it. I did it for everyone. I kind of watched the video in two times speed. Is the same kind of thing we were talking about with Zugzwang. So you have a little bit more of some dynamic play with speed, especially when you're throwing your whips. But I want to have those. I want to have both of those extremes. By the way, Kevin, you just lost your camera.
yeah.
I want to have both of those extremes coming out, and I don't want to have it just in whips and liquid. I want to see that extreme like bam 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 bam. You know, like you're going through these concepts and these connections, and you're doing it with gusto and speed, and that's obviously something that takes like practice and everything. But having that extreme, and then also having like this like insanely slow like boom boom, right? You know, having that juxtaposition of those levels of speed and then mixing in the speed that you use now already is also going to give you this range of motion and adaptability within your show and the moves that you're doing, right? Because sometimes, and I think it's also partially due to the fact that you like to glove to like drum and bass and like house music and stuff that's like very like the tempo is consistent. Um, but being able to have that dichotomy of speeds will kind of it'll allow you to not feel so forced to constantly be moving through your forms. And I feel like your flow is almost forcing you to kind of be in that like I'm constantly moving and I'm flowing and changing where I'm at. I'm switching to liquid and then to finger rolls, right? Like you're almost forcing yourself to not be able to let those concepts breathe and to be able to stick into more of those like true angles that Kevin was talking about.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes we can be using the flow as a crutch, right? I've said this a couple times before. But like utilizing your flow as a crutch to help you glide because it feels good when you glide and you're kind of effortlessly going through it. I would say limit test.
Yeah.
Like limit test how long can you do your connections? Like how long can you your brain like the amounts like I want you to like overload your brain with all these connections, this discipline, staying, that bandwidth. It's a muscle in your brain. Like being true to that form and stick. It's a muscle, right? And then so like just that's out. That's the biggest thing that I would say after watching this show is just testing yourself, being able to test yourself, be in a connection for as long as you can, man. You know, without floating, because I'm going through this show right now. Because yeah, you have something that not a lot of glovers who are starting off nowadays have, and that is that
Yes.
OG flow. It's that
Yeah.
it's that Glover flow, bro. Like you've got that, right? And then so you could think about it this way. You're kind of ahead in that aspect today. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You're kind of ahead in that aspect. The new kids nowadays, they got the forms and the connectivity, being able to do it longer. But some of them, they don't got like that OG flow, right? So like for this one, yeah, it's just being more connected. Ever since I heard you say commit, I've been working on exactly that. Absolutely, bro. Yeah, and I did hear you probably, well, this was like September this is almost a year ago, bro. I'm sure you've
Oh yeah,
I'm
that's what you're
sure
saying.
you've
It's just the last
improved.
video he
Yeah,
had, so
yeah, gotcha. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean that's pretty much the biggest thing, right? Because then we can talk about logic, you know what I mean? Because
yeah.
right now it's hard to talk about or like to pinpoint certain parts of the show of logic simply because of the stylistic preference. But like once you get to like the point where you are able to just like commit longer, then we can start talking about like the actual logic, right? Now we can start getting to like the nitty-gritty of every single connection, right? But I'm sure you're probably there now at this point. Big shout outs to all current Gloving Academy Patreon subscribers. Thank you so much for all the support. Seriously, guys. The Patreon's got weekly educational and never before seen content. So if you want to take your gloving to the next level and learn from me, come join the Gloving Academy Patreon.